All right, so it's QCA. We haven't done one in a while, so sorry about that, but life happens. And here we are on this great Thursday, September 29th, on the eve of, what is it? Is it Ian? I don't even remember the name of the hurricane. What's the name of the hurricane? Mr. Shells, do you know? It's Ian, right? You don't care. You're too far away. Everybody over here is.
Its name's Ian. Yeah,
It's Ian, right?
we got rain from the side effects, but
Really?
I
Already?
don't know.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're going to get rain, apparently. We're going to get a tropical storm warning up here in North Carolina, in Mooresville. I've got the window open, just trying to check stuff out. But we should be fine.
That's ironic. My neighbor just moved from North Carolina.
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's. I mean, it's not a bad place to be. Um. What is? Oh yeah, it's coming. It's coming for us. Yeah, this is where the storm track's going to go. So we're looking at a graphic right now of the Hurricane Ian going across the coast, and then this they said it wasn't going to go inland, and now they're saying it is going to go inland. So if it follows this track, it's going to miss us barely. I mean, it will hit us, but I don't know. We'll see. By the time it gets up here, apparently historically, the only time this area has ever gotten really beat up by a hurricane was Hugo. Hugo apparently really messed up Charlotte because it didn't dissipate and went right over the top of the town. So we are in the track, but the coast of North Carolina gets hit pretty heavily all the time. Outer Banks, I would never want to be in Outer Banks. Outer Banks is like this little teeny tiny sand strip out in the middle of nowhere. It like kind of disappears. They've had it like entire cities just get wiped off, like what is it, Gaston, Texas? Have you heard about that? Like there was a town in Texas. It was out on a little island, and the entire city got completely obliterated and washed away. Just like historic. Look it up. What was it? What's the town? I gotta look it up. Texas, city washed away by a hurricane. I think it was Gaston, and I think the Great Galveston. Oh, Galveston. That's right. The Great Galveston storm, and they actually made an NPR special about it. So 2/3. Yeah. Into CLI utilities, like Cowsay. Oh God, look at that. I think this is the one. Yeah, look at that, man. It's entirely leveled the whole place. I thought it like took them. There's this. They showed it. There's one scene that there's literally nothing there. It's like washed away and replaced with sand. Look at that, man. Look at that. Oh, we're looking at these pictures that are like just broken up timber. It's like, oh, it's so sad. It's super dark. A demon. There's a demon behind me. I hope not. Don't scare me like that. There is a demon behind me, though. Yeah. There is. There's like several. Yeah. And this is, I guess, too, in memorial of all the people who got washed away or something. It's kind of sad. So hopefully that doesn't happen over here. Anyway, off to... It's sort of a terrible. It's lots of life. My parents used to really worry about me being out here, and then I kind of yelled at them for being worried. Now they don't worry. And this makes Python packages composable with CLI utilities. Okay, not interested. The hurricane, it did? It went right by you? It didn't touch you? Wow.
Closest thing we used to do a hurricane's a water spout.
Yeah. There was some stuff that went around the internet with the water spouts today. They had pictures of them. I don't know if they were from this hurricane, but it is pretty scary. Okay, so speaking of scary, here's a close-up again of me while we go read this stuff. Let me find the QCA Discord. So if you have a question you want to answer, so here's the rule for QCA. If you are in the studio audience, your question comes first. You have priority. So if you made the sacrifice to be here, your question matters first. We'll answer it first. So if you have a question, put Q in front of the question and send it, or write it in the Discord. Otherwise, I'm just going to pick from the questions that are here. And I'm going to kind of work backwards, actually, which I realize is not fair, but it's just going to a way for me to kind of catch up. And I'm just going to kind of bust through these as fast as possible. So the question today, somebody asked, why are files not executable? Let's see. Why are files not executable but can be run with bash? Okay, so this is a tech question, and I'm going to try to describe it while I do it on the screen. So if you're just listening to the podcast, you can understand it. So in order to understand what is happening when you run a thing, and we covered this in the boost quite a bit, so I'll try to go quickly through it. So this is imagine the computer is doing this, right? So whenever you type anything at all on the command line, the first thing the shell interpreter does, in this case bash, which is a running binary program. It is a running program. It's running inside of the brain of, the memory is all loaded up. That's bash is actually running. And it's an ongoing bash program that's actually running. It's listening to every command you type. And it takes that command, interprets that into machine code, which ends up being like syscalls, which we actually used syscalls the other day to debug a problem with IPv6. And it sends those syscalls into the kernel, and then those are in C, and then kernel does its thing, gets it into assembly, and sends it all back to you. Okay. So every time you type anything in the command line, you are executing a command, right? So anytime you type something in, so when you type something in and you hit enter, this is how the thought process for the computer goes. Assuming we're anthropomorphizing the computer, whatever. It says, okay, what is this thing? What is the first thing in the thing you typed in? So if we type, for example, ls space -l, the very first thing it does is it says, what is the first argument, literally arg0, $0, of the command? And it says, what is that thing? And basically, you can actually do the same thing by doing type space ls, and you'll see essentially the same determination that the bash shell would do. It says, okay, ls is an alias for ls-h color auto. So it's the same thing as if I type those things, right? And so it's an alias. Okay, well then it looks up the alias, and then so if you wanted to type what type is that, like so you type which ls, so it looks for that first thing and it says, okay, is that thing in the path anywhere? And the path is the place where stuff lives that is going to be run. It's in all caps path. I created a command called path that makes it prettier to see. And you can just see it. It's just VSC path. So it's just echo -e, and then it does a parameter expansion for path, anything with the colons, and it basically just adds a line return. So you get this nice pretty path. It's in my dot files in artofmixrob/dot if you want to go see it. I just use the thing called path. It's a command called path. In front of the alias to have the real command print before running. You can do that, yeah, but you don't need to do that. So if you want the real one to run, you just put a backslash in front of it, ls-l, and that will run the actual one. So a lot of people don't know this. I found this out in 2019 on Twitch. So if you type a backslash in front of the first argument of the command line, that will cause it to ignore any functions or aliases that have that name. And that says, go use the one that I would find with which. Okay. And type ls. Yeah, ls is alias. That's what we were just using, Mossy. Did you miss that part? Thank you for repeating what I just said 5 minutes ago. So alias is alias to ls-h, and so that's alias. So that's the first thing it says. And then it runs ls, right? And then what it does is it parses the rest of the command line up into fields, right? And they're called fields. A field is, by definition, a non-white space thing that is delimited by white space. White space being spaces, tabs, line returns, and anything, not just spaces. Usually it's just spaces. But in this case, it's really anything, right? So what it chops up that whole thing and it turns it into arguments. So yeah, this is argument 0. This would be argument 1, and this would be argument 2. or field argument 1, 2, or 3, however you want to go for it like that. Inside the alias. Okay. So anyway, let's keep going. So you've got, that's okay. So the question is actually about how does it know to run it. So if I do temp, vi temp foo, and I put echo hello, right? If I type /temp foo and run it, it can't run it. Use the full path, and it's like I can't do it, right? And the reason for that is because it doesn't know what it is. If I do type temp foo, and you can see, that's weird. Type, that's really weird. Oh, not type, file. Duh. Okay, so it looks at what you typed, and it's like, okay, so it's, first of all, it says, is it a thing that I can run? So if it's ls, it says, yes, it's an alias, and it says, but it's actually the ls command, and it says, is it a binary? Okay, is it a binary? Is that binary in my path? Yes. And then it runs it. But in the case of foo, it can't do that. In the case of foo right now that we're doing, it can't do that, right? So then it's like, then bash is like, the interpreter says, well, okay, let me try something else here. And it says, okay, so it's not an alias, it's not a function, it's not a command. I mean, I don't know what it is. It's probably a file, and maybe it's a file that can be run. Maybe it's an executable. That's the official name. Maybe it's an executable. Why isn't it just called a binary or script or a program? It is a program, but it's called an executable. Why? Because it can be executed, right? But in this case, it just says permission denied. I can't do it. It's like, okay, I found a file there. A temp foo, right? I mean, you could probably do this, temp blah, and it's like, no, there's no file at all. I have no idea what that is. I have no idea what you're typing. You're totally screwed up. But if it finds a file, it's like, ooh, I have a file. Let's see if I can run this file by itself. And that is where the answer to your question comes, right? Because in order for the file to be executed, it has to have a executable permission. And right now it doesn't. Right now it's a plain old text file. Read, write, read. And if you're wondering, yes, this is where RWX comes from. So if you want to do read, write, and execute, then you have to make that thing runnable. So you schmod that. Now, no, actually, before we go there, to answer the other part of the question was, why does it work like this? Bash temp foo. Okay. The reason that works is because this first thing here is what? It's an executable program. It's the bash interpreter. The same one that we're running interactively. But in this case, and by the way, it could be Python. You could do Python space Python program. You could do Ruby space Ruby program. Any interpreted language. An interpreted language. So let me be clear here. Nothing runs on the computer that is not binary. I'm going to say that again. Nothing on the computer runs that is not binary. When you run a Python program, when you run a Ruby program, when you run a bash program, GCC is a binary. Okay. The only thing that actually executes ever, the only thing that actually runs in the kernel of the machine, or that gets interpreted and sends all this stuff, are compiled ELF binary programs. And on for this person, that's super important. So like you can actually check this out. If you go look at like ls, for example, the source of ls, you'll see this little ELF binary, right? And those bits at the beginning of the file, those like ones and zeros at the very beginning of the file, identify that file as being a binary. Now, if it sees that stuff, then the bash interpreter will like, oh, this is a binary, and it literally injects it all right into memory, and it runs immediately because it's in memory, as I understand it. Okay, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but that's essentially what it does. Okay, so nothing runs that's not a compiled ELF binary on this system, right? At all. So that means anytime that you're running a script of any kind, an interpreted script, the thing that runs is the interpreter. Let me prove it to you. So as if grep bash, right? Look at all these bashes that are running, right? Look at this one. Oh, I'm doing a test. I'm running some test code, right? The binary that's actually running, the process, which is a running binary, is bash. It's not the script itself, right? Now, let me show you something else though. So if I run Let's try another one. Let's run fishies for a second, and let's do ps-ef grep fishies, and you'll see that. Oh, hey, look at that. You look at this. So directly have to read it and execute it. Right. So in this case, we see that the fishies program is actually not a program. It's a script. It's an interpreted script that's run by Perl. Perl is the process that runs. And interpreters, you can think of C3PO here if it helps you remember. What does C3PO do? C3PO interprets things. He speaks, however many dialects, right? So it takes in stuff, interprets it into machine code, and then that machine code gets executed. And in fact, it actually compiles it in some kind into something called bytecode, which is another thing we'll talk about. Java does the same thing, by the way. So Java is a very interesting exception to all this stuff because Java is both compiled and interpreted, right? It has to be pre-compiled down to bytecode that you can't read, that only an interpreter can read. And then the interpreter still has to translate that bytecode, which it can do very efficiently, into the kernel. Same thing with Python, by the way. Python does bytecode, but it does it without you seeing it. And then it will leave. If you've ever seen a PYC file around, it's because it turned that Python code into bytecode. So the next time it runs, it'll run more quickly. Because every single time that you run an interpreted program, no matter what, it has to parse that entire file every time. Fun fact, Go's compiler and parser is so fast that it can compile and run Go code faster than Python. You got to see the benchmarks on that. It's really funny. That's how slow Python is. So, but so you can run any program at all as long as you put the interpreter first, right? Because the interpreter, most interpreters, not all, but they take as their first argument the program, the name of a script to run. This is why you see people type Python 3 whatever all the time, right? Because they're running the program and they're saying, hey, this first argument that I gave you here, this file, go open that, parse it up, and then run it for me. And that's what it's doing. The only difference between that and typing temp foo is that this is kind of a shortcut. Because why? Because we have written a shell script. A shell script is on the system, and we can use that shortcut as long as we give it a hint. We have to give the bash interpreter a hint. We have to give the system a hint. And so the hint is we have to chmod plus x the file, right? And now the file is executable. It has that extra bit in the permissions map that says, oh, you're executable? Awesome. And then you can run it, right? Now that's all well and good until, well, let's try that with some Python code. What would happen? So this is part of a lesson that I've taught before, but I'm willing to do it again. What if if that works with Bash, let's try it with Python. Okay? Somebody tell me why this isn't going to work with Python. Why isn't this going to work? It's a program, right? It's executable. It has a problem. Why? Think about that. Yeah. What is the default program? What is the interactive shell I'm using right now? It defaults to Bash, right? Bash tries to load it. It's like, I don't know what you're talking about there. And this is where the shebang line comes in. So this is a unique Unix thing. You remember that little elf binary we talked about at the beginning of ls, right? Okay, so if you go to the beginning of any binary file, you got this thing that shows up as elf. It's actually the same number of bits as a shebang line. So in addition to, it says, oh my God, this file is executable, right? And then the first thing the interpreter does, the Bash interpreter does, or whatever is the program, it says, hey, what are the first 16 bits? Modules turns Python modules into Bash commands. Nice. So then, yeah, I mean, it looks for these first two characters, right? Now, these just happen to be human readable, right? But that's just the nature of it. So, and if it sees a shebang as the first two characters, it has to be the first two characters, right? If it sees that, then it takes the rest of the line as as if it had been typed into the shell and then passed that file. So we can say this. We can say user. Where's Python? User bin Python 3. Okay. So now we have which Python 3. Right. So then it says, okay, I'm going to run. This is the program I'm going to run. And then it literally feeds the whole file into that program on standard input. Okay. So it's as if you had run the same exact thing as this. Actually, specifically, user bin python 3 temp foo. All right. That is what the shebang line does. All right. Now you can get creative with the shebang line. Sometimes you can put extra things on there. Normally you shouldn't, but normally you can. You'll see something else in the wild called env python 3, and what that says is I don't care where Python lives. User bin env looks around into the path for a program named Python and then runs it. Okay, so it could be a user local bin, it can be user bin, it can be anywhere, and it finds it. That was popularized by Ruby people. It's very insecure, but it's convenient, so people do that all the time. But that's what's up. You'll see me do that with Bash all the time too, because I mean, on Mac it's user local bin Bash, and then on others it's user. So if you have a script you just want to share it, you don't want to have to change the shebang line. Even though it's insecure, you can just use user bin env, and a lot of people still do that. It's even slower though, because now it has to run this program to look up where this program lives, and then run that program, and then send the whole file to it. So it's even slower. You'll never notice that it's slow though, because you don't care, right? So that's it. That's the shebang. That's pretty much what's up with the whole Bash script thing. Hopefully that answers the question on that one. And I mean, one last thing I'll say about this is you can write a compiled code, right? So we could write. Let's write some compiled code. So let's write some. Let's make what's in foo right here. So let's make a directory for foo. Rm foo. Make directory. We're going to make a little Go program here. And so we're going to go into foo, and we're going to say main.go, and we're going to say vim foo this bar, and we're going to compile this, right? So go build and go mod init. Actually, no, let's just do go build main.go. All right, so now we have a main. And now when I run main, it just runs, right? Now, notice that when I built it, it automatically made it an executable. This would be the same if I was coding in C. And if you look in the program, you'll see that it's a binary program. So the reason that everybody's going gaga for compiled languages is because, and Mossy is trying to make the point of Python's just as good as compiled languages, which is not true. I'm exaggerating, but that's so. Because compiled languages just run. And I mean, the amount of time it takes to run one, just benchmark it, it's crazy. Not to mention the fact that if you want to share this program with somebody else on the same type of architecture, you just send them the file. You don't have to wrap up all of the other stuff. You don't have to make sure they have Python 3. This is what killed Java, by the way. The idea was that everybody would have a Java interpreter on their computer, and it would all be the same, and people could just write Java bytecode, and it would run everywhere, and everybody would sing Kumbaya, and it did not happen that way. And people started shipping the Java JVM, all of it, with everything, because they couldn't be sure they were going to get the right version. The world has learned that interpreted languages are dumb. And in fact, the most famous comment on this is from Guido van Rossum himself, the creator of Python. I learned a painful lesson that for small programs, dynamic typing is great. And dynamic typing is a different thing, but you could extend this to say that non-compiled languages. For large programs, you need to have more disciplined approach, and it helps have the language actually give you discipline. They're talking about typing, but it's the same thing for being interpreted versus compiled, in my opinion. Rather than almost every single compiled language is strictly typed. Almost every one. All right. He's specifically, crushing on TypeScript, which he wanted to turn Python into. He even said so. Okay. So anyway, okay, we're gonna talk about why do people think unit tests are bad? Let's talk about that question. Let's do that one next. So I think I answered that one pretty good. Let's do this question. This is a live question from Groplop. Why do people think unit tests are bad? Because they don't want to write them. They're lazy. Bottom line. They just think they're lazy. Impression of Linux work. Yeah, it's a different thing. All right. So here's the question before us is whether unit testing is bad. What is unit testing? So when it comes to testing, there's like lots of different types of testing. And what are you testing? You're testing systems. TOGG get at a big rant on unit tests. Yeah, well, a lot of people rant about unit tests. Most of them are just too fucking lazy to write tests at all, and they just want to write code and I'm among them. So before we get too far along here, I'm not pointing a finger because I'm with them. So you have several camps when it comes to testing. Okay, in fact, there's another question about TDD here that we'll get to. So test first of all, tests are, the people who don't like unit tests are not saying don't test. I would imagine TOGG is not saying that as well. What they're annoyed by is the obsession on unit testing when at the expense of overall, uh, overall testing of the system, which they call system integration testing, or they call user acceptance testing, which means users actually like the thing that you wrote and it meets the criteria. I mean, there are lots of other forms of testing, and unfortunately, this whole CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment, has focused on unit testing above everything else. And unit testing specifically, let's be clear, unit testing is testing one function at a time most of the time. It's not testing more than one function or one method at a time. That's what unit testing is primarily defined to be. In fact, let's go like, what is unit testing? Let's see what the internet says about that. In computer programming, unit testing is a software testing method by which individual units of source code sets of one or more computer program modules together with associated control data, usage procedures, and operating procedures are tested to determine whether they are fit for use. That's a very broad definition. So here it says unit testing focuses on testing the functionality of the individual units. And you have to define what a unit is. And most of the time, a unit is a method or a class or a struct or a, some bit of operational, piece of machinery when it comes to the coding. Almost always, though, it translates directly into testing a method or function. And so the reason people get annoyed by this is because there's so much focus on testing these functions that they don't test other things. They don't test how the pieces work together. They don't test response times. They don't test usage patterns. So the term TDD, test-driven development, which means that you write the test before you write the code. Basically, most people, when they hear TDD, that's what they hear. There's other people who are very pedantic will hear something completely different. Kind of like when you ask Jordan Peterson if he believes in God, and you get a 40-minute response, and the answer is no. So, I don't want to be that pedantic about it. So I don't think unit testing is bad. And have I tested? Yeah, I stream a lot. So yeah, and that's counting the fishies too, but yeah. So why do people think unit tests are bad? Unit tests are bad because they get overemphasized, right? Now, I happen to be a fan. In fact, today we were working on, what were we doing? We were doing some coding. We were working on Gin. Yeah, we're working on the Gin lab, which you can go check out if you want to. And we actually wrote some tests in there. So let me just go pull those up really quick. Because I was working on how to do mock testing, which is where testing can really go off the rails. Because then you have tests for the mocks and mocks for the tests and blah, blah, blah. You know what I mean? It could get really, really hairy. And yes, 3 hours later. Exactly. Just say it, believe in God. That's Sam Harris. That's Sam Harris saying that to Jordan Peterson, not me. I'm a big Sam Harris fan. So, anyway, so here we go. So here is an example test. This is one of the reasons I like Go is the test framework is built into the language, and you can have example tests that are automatically included as part of your documentation. Let me show you. So if I go to, so here is my bonsai branch, right? And I've written an example test here, and this test code is automatically runnable from the playground. No other language on planet Earth has this. I am not exaggerating. I can click on run, and it will run it in the playground. I can change args from greet hi French to, something else. It takes a while for it to go get it. You can greet hello French. We'll run that and see if it does that. And you can see how I'm showing it. I'm running it, changes it. It actually runs it. It goes back, compiles it, runs it, and then gets it back to you. You get this example in your documentation for free. But if you create a test case like this, it uses reflection, which The test suite actually parses the code. Go has its own internal parser for its language, which is just amazing. And then it parses it up and it says, it looks for the first word example, and then it says get albums, and then it runs this thing and it associates it in the documentation with the get albums function. And then that whole thing can be tested. So this is an example of a unit test that actually makes a web request. So it down here you'll see it uses the Gen middleware, and it does r.serve HTTP, and it hands off the writer, the response recorder, which is the response writer, and then it passes it on. This is an example of a unit test, right? And one of the reasons that Go dominates in the cloud native, we're talking dominates, like authoritatively dominates 95% of all cloud native applications that are written in Go. The reason is because of stuff like this. You can write documentation that doubles as an example that is also a unit test and that does interactive web requests, all built into the language. I said stuff by default. Why? Because it makes, yeah, okay. Saying is good versus bad. Yes. So yeah, the testing, it can be. Tests are good, but yeah. People have really, I mean, look, tech people love to be contrarian, and I'm no different. I occasionally like that. I only get really contrarian when it's annoying, because it's ruining the world or confusing people. And I happen to agree that being overly obsessed with test-driven development can actually detract from the deliverables when it might have been better. Some things can't even be tested at all. It's like you cannot test a command. Once you compile a command, you can't test that in Go. And let me give you an example of this. So the reason that I factored out all the code, and this is why TDD is good, because if you start thinking about how you're going to write the test up front, it will actually shape how you write the code so that the code can be testable. If you write code that's shit, if I had put all that stuff, so let me give you an example. So this album's API, the main.go program, this is the entire program. The entire program calls api.serve. Until I started writing unit tests, that code was hard-coded inside of the executable and could not be tested without writing a bash script to test it. I could no longer, I mean, you can, it's really, really weird magic because, to have it be testable within Go's framework. But because I noticed this early on, I can go ahead and see right away that I needed to change that. And so I factored it out. And this code, I kid you not, this code was cut and paste directly out. Juniper berries, yes. I cut and paste this code directly out of the executable. And then I had the executable just call this code. There's nothing in the executable left to test. In fact, I can test this entire thing if I needed to. I don't need to, but I could, right? I could break this down even further. And so it is important that the focus on testing early on is not misguided. I think it's right. Thank you for that. But that sub there, I appreciate that. But I gotta say that I'm with them because I've seen CI/CD people get so obsessed with testing that the SolarWinds bug happens. Why? Why did the SolarWinds bug happen? Because no human was looking at the code anymore. If a human had been involved with vetting the source code that was getting committed, they would have caught it. But they didn't. And if you look at this, if you look at the SolarWinds hack, it's absolutely brilliant. It was very, very patient. The first thing they did is they said, hey, can we actually commit something here into the source tree? Let's see. So they committed something very innocuous. You can go read about it. They committed something very innocuous just to see if they can even pull it off without anybody noticing. Nobody noticed it. Why? Because of all the CI/CD automation and all the testing and automated frameworks and everything. No eyeballs were on the tests anymore. So this code made it in. Like, well, that's interesting. So then what do? They obfuscated something, made it look kind of weird, and then they committed that. No problems. Nobody noticed anything. And then they're like, okay, we're down. So then they wrote malware, bin hexed it as a string so that nobody, even if they saw it, they would just glaze over it because it's just a bunch of bin hex. And they committed that shit to the source code tree. Now, this is all, by the way, after the user set the password and broke into like some shit like password 123 or whatever. Seriously, that was their thing. And so they broke into the source code and they were able to do these commits and nobody noticed. Nobody was reading anything about the commits. Nobody saw anything. And boom, the biggest hack. This thing went all the way into the NSA, CIA, and FBI systems internally. That's how big a deal it was. And it was fundamentally because no human was involved in the testing or the commits. It was too automated. It was too much CI/CD. So people who yeah, people, they love this approach. I know. So the people that were attacking, the people that come out against, or they're pushing TDD and CI/CD and all that stuff. I I see the point that people are making when they're pushing back on it. They're like, no, we still need to have a human involved. There is nothing like having a quality assurance engineer whose job it is to make you look like shit. I don't mean it. It's like I kind of overstated it, but it's true. When I was at IBM and I was writing compliance code and audit code, hundreds of endpoints they were called in BigFix, and we had a QA engineer, and their job literally was to look at our shell code and try to. We had no shell check, right? And we had to write it in POSIX, which is just so error prone. Bash is much less error prone, and it was like so error prone. And so we're like, okay. And they would constantly find these like little nitpicky things, right? And I'm like, oh, and we'd be so annoyed when they would like review the code. I was like, okay, is it ready? Yeah, we'd commit it. And then they would like look at it and they would find ways to break it. I wish we had that. I wish we had that still. I'm mad that we don't have that because I'm sorry, my neighbor's going to yell at me, but that is the reason that we're getting so owned by everybody, because there's nobody at every commit trying to break the thing that you just committed. We don't have that anymore. We don't have this antagonistic relationship with a QA engineer in our enterprises anymore. It's too expensive to pay QA engineers, even though they're like low rung on the totem pole. It used to be a great entry level job. An entry level programming job, one of the best ones ever, would be a QA engineer, because you're getting to read all this amazing good code and you're trying to find ways to break it. And the seniors are like hating you, but they also love you because they keep your code from going out bad. In fact, it's one of the things about pair programming. This is interesting. So my buddy and I at work, just kind of on our own, we just sort of independently started doing pair programming every day at 2:00 or so, and we just check each other. We check each other all the time, like every day. We come in, and it's a little bit of accountability. What did you do? Like kind of. I mean, it's not as formal as anything else, but we get to, oh, what did you do? Oh, I worked on this and this and this, and then we can like run ideas past each other. We can run like naming conventions past each other, and it's it's not like I type and you do like really true pair programming, but having at least two people work on a coding project at the same time and constantly reviewing each other's code before it commits, even if you're committing to master because you just want to be faster, is an exceptionally valuable thing to do. And as particularly if one of you's got a little bit more experience with the language, and in our case, he's got a lot of experience with CI/CD integration, and he's got a host of phenomenal things that he's doing. A lot of really strong experience with OpenAPI, and I have 10 years of Go experience. So we go good together. I also have 15 years of Perl experience, and we're porting a Perl code base. Just today, actually, he's like, can you help me decipher what's going on here? And I was able to complain about the use of $argv, at argv, to pass data between functions in this horrible Perl code. And he's like, yeah, I thought I was going crazy. He goes, no, man, you're seeing it right. But I could vet it for him because I was. So the takeaway of this is this rant all came about because of this TDD comment, right? So TDD is not bad. Testing's not bad, but overemphasis on just unit testing, when you could de-emphasize that a little bit, maybe add another person to help vet your code, look over the shoulder with you, and then do systems integration testing and user acceptance testing, which is also big. Anybody ever been forced to use something that was horrible? I'm gonna suggest something. Lotus Notes, Lotus, what is it? Lotus Messenger, or Lotus Notes is mail. There are applications that are so abysmally bad that I'm 100% convinced that the only way that application ever made it to the light of day is because the people that made it and the people who funded it never actually asked a user to tell them what they thought of it. Yeah, well, thank God you haven't. So you know what I'm talking about. Especially enterprise applications, there is this ivory tower mentality in software engineering, that we know better than you. The users don't know what they want. We don't want to ask the users what they want. We don't want to present the options. And so what do? Users are stupid. They don't know what they want. We just have to give them a thing. that's totally different things. I know TDD and UX is not the same thing, but users have big number, but this idea, so the I don't. It's not related to the TDD thing. It is, but I'm making another. There's another mistake that we make all the time, and that is we don't do user acceptance testing. User acceptance testing is when you have a stakeholder. People say they do Agile all the time, and I'm like, where's your stakeholder rep? People, and then they say, "Oh, we don't like Agile." You know why you don't like Agile? Because you don't want to ask a user what they think. You just want to make it and have them use it and be happy, and then they scream bloody murder when it doesn't work, or they don't know how to use it, and it's the user's fault because they're too dumb, right? Yeah, it's just people who have been in the industry long enough know exactly what I'm talking about. We don't have time to ask the users what they want. We're not making this for users. We're making this for our deadlines. So blah, 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 blah. There's like a million things that are the priority. They're not usability. Let me give you an example. Compare the AWS graphic interface to DigitalOcean's graphic interface. Anybody ever use the two? It's no comparison. No comparison whatsoever. Amazon might have a bunch of big fancy ass things, but when you actually ask the user which tool is easier for them to use, which one has had active involvement from a user participation base, the DigitalOcean will win every fucking time. Every time. The interface is absolutely pristine. It's beautiful. It has usability in mind. Amazon's like, you know what? You're lucky you get to use this. You're lucky. And last time I said AWS had a horrible user experience, you know what they said? That's because it's all on the command line. The CLI is second to none. I'm like, oh, that makes about sense because that's exactly what I would expect engineers to make. Yeah, I would exactly expect engineers to make something that's extremely unnecessarily overcomplicated and unneeded. These are the same people that make like displays and dashboards on your car that have so many buttons that if you push them, you end up in a wreck by the time you got to the end of it. Because they don't actually care about the user. They care about deadlines, they care about costs and other things. So this is a big pet peeve of mine, so I'm ranting. All right, let's get to another question that's less ranty. But I did want to go over this one. I think this is important. So why do people always forget user acceptance testing? You don't even bother to ask the user what they want. You know what the best software that's ever made? Software that somebody made for themselves because they wanted it. They had an itch to scratch and they made their own thing. Linux. Let's start there. It's customer experience. I know, and they have a horrible customer experience. It's absolutely abysmally bad, and they know it. They don't care though. Okay, let's see here. What's going on here? What's going on here? What's going on up in here? IH Developers is raising their hand. I'm gonna invite them in. Invite to speak. Do you have something to say about that, IH Developer? Are you still there? It's welcome. It's one of our IH Developers, another one of our members who's been on the board. How you doing? Do you have any opinions on testing?
Hello!
Oh.
How's everyone doing?
We're doing good.
I'm sorry if I am loud.
Yes, you
it's
are.
5 a.m. in the morning. I think you know the routine.
Yeah, you're just a tad loud. Take it down a bunch. Normally we like to have you come in before we go. So, but anyway.
I was hearing about Go and HTTP and testing, and I was investigating, a quick framework to start with. I was trying to compare between two tools or like two frameworks, which is the Go language for making an HTTP RESTful API.
Yeah.
And the Spring framework.
A Spring framework is a Java thing. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a Java. I mean, if you have a Java code base, Spring is great. We don't, but yeah.
I in the end had to choose the Spring because it has a way to boot so fast. Go does not boot so fast for me. Boot as in, it helps me stay very simple.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you have to look at I don't know. I mean, we'd have to do a comparison on that. Gin is actually the fastest of the frameworks so far that I'm testing and looking at. It's also the most mature.
Yeah. I think in my methodology, maybe the worst thing that I I wanted to start making prototypes, but instead of thinking about, how to make them fast, I tried to think about how to make them efficient, which I think
Yeah.
can be problematic.
Oh, are you talking about how to write them fast? How
No,
to?
no, the methodology to approach the design
Oh,
itself.
right. Yeah,
I can do both.
yeah, yeah. Jin is my favorite for that so far, but we have a lot going on. We have a couple more questions before we leave. Let me see. Oh, we are 10:05. So let's take a couple more questions. Anybody in the audience have a question that they want to ask before? Let's do one more. Otherwise, I'm going to grab one from the questions. We got quite a few backlogged in the QCA. And I actually I'm going to hand pick one if I don't hear anybody else. So there is a lengthy question here in the chat that I'm gonna answer because it's a little bit it's something I really believe in, and it's a really long one here. I'm typing it in.
Is it going to be a rant?
Yes, it's going to be it's very very long, but I like it because it's fundamentally in my you know it's something that I'm really really interested in. So I'm going to go ahead and answer this one. So I have to read it. It's pretty long, so y'all can tell me. It says, "Hey, I stumbled across your video about helping people learn Linux and thought it was a great talk. Personally, I wanted to teach free classes to disadvantaged kids about how to use computer and learn some basic scripting skills that can help them in many kinds of employment, using cron jobs to produce daily reports, etc. I think in modern times, these kinds of skills can provide a lot of economic mobility for people in a vast variety of typical office jobs, and you don't need to be a full-on programmer to do this kind of stuff. Just a small bit of knowledge in this domain goes a long way. It was great to hear your perspective in hosting classes and the issues you encountered. Would you have any advice to someone like myself who wants to provide these kinds of classes for free, specifically targeting kids who come from poorer families and are less likely to be able to provide for resources like laptops? Is it feasible? Is it out of place to contact schools? Should I try to host it with a school or do it independently, like a weekly class at a local library, etc.? Now, there's a lot in there, but I got to tell you, this question is something that I almost started a company over. So some of you may know this, but I'll just repeat it. I did in 2013. I started my own company because nobody was teaching coding to kids of any type at all. And the schools weren't even teaching it. AP Computer Science was abysmally bad, and it just wasn't happening. So I took retirement money out, took a penalty on the early retirement money, and started a company. Blah blah blah. And this Twitch channel and this YouTube is the leftovers of that. After COVID hit and a bunch of things, I turned to an online platform and started doing this. For a while during all of this, I considered starting something called the Soil Initiative, which was sustainable, open, interactive learning, independent learning, sorry. And it was designed to be a nonprofit that would help people like this person asking this question to get good with the lessons that I had learned the hard way, frankly, trying to start my own learning community. You can't call them schools. There's like legal reasons. I use school sometimes for short, but officially, if you call yourself a school, you got to fulfill a whole bunch of extra requirements in the United States. So I started, a mentored learning community, which is a totally different thing. It's like piano lessons. And this is a really, really big question. And the short answer to the question is, this is the book I want to write. This is the book I want to write, the most important book of all, because this book hopefully would encourage and give other people the tools to start their own learning communities. And everyone has a different flavor. There's Learn with Leon. The Parmesian does learning. Yeah, you used to have, what's his name? Oh, God, what's the other Mastermind? I haven't seen him. Has anybody seen Mastermind on Twitch lately? I haven't seen him at all recently. But you have LTN Bob, who doesn't do Twitch much, but he's thinking about doing it more. You have Het Tanis, who, was thinking of stopping and then heard me say, you need to stay doing it. He kept doing it. We need more of these communities. The tough part about this, and I'm going to cut right to the chase, is the word free. Because obviously, I eventually ended up taking a loss because I bought equipment and I didn't charge enough money because I only charged them $50 an hour, but only dentists, kids can afford that. It was really horrible. And so that's why actually one of the reasons I went online and did it. I do have an email that eventually I need to read publicly from somebody in the Philippines who wrote me a 2-page letter that said, "Thank you for just sharing what you do because it changed my stars." Those were his words. And he stopped being a farmer and now he's learning code. And that's this thing. It says it doesn't have to be a full-on coder. It just a little bit will change people. So what would you do? First of all, I'm going to answer these last questions directly. How do you get laptops? Have the kids or have the people. It would be amazing. I think that TwitchCon is coming up, and if anybody's going to TwitchCon, somebody needs to get the ear of executive over Twitch and say, you have an opportunity to revolutionize education in the world here. Why don't you want to take it?
I think they will have the same attitude as Amazon services when you tell them the dashboard is not good.
Yeah, they're like, oh well, you're lucky to be here. I'm not even partner, for God's sake. Because why? Because I only have 60 average viewers. And meanwhile, I have people complaining because they can't get the bit rate that they want. Because it's a variable bit rate usually. And that's one of the greatest things that they give to partner is that partners are guaranteed for their end users to be able to pick their own bit rate. So you have people in, other countries who can't necessarily watch 1080p, and I'm locked into 1080p because I'm just an affiliate. So there's a number of things that Twitch does that Freckled Science is amazing. Oh, I know. She's crazy. Yeah, so is Maya. Maya, who does the bird refuge. She's fantastic. And Maya is actually huge. She's huge. She's got thousands of people on her stream all the time. She's an IRL streamer. So, the opportunity for learning and education as well as entertainment and just having fun is just spectacularly amazing. I think that, frankly, and if I ever actually go to TwitchCon, what I would do is I would talk to TwitchCon in advance and I would say, I'm not logged into 1080p right now, right? I don't know if they started giving it to everybody. I think I've started to get, nobody's complained about that recently with me. So they either changed it or they've got some new algorithm, hopefully, that's like if you're a certain number or whatever, they're giving it to you. But before, it was the only partners got guaranteed bandwidth rates. So I just would like to say, so that would be really great. Yeah, thank you for that. So how do you get laptops? I mean, most of the problem getting people to learn how to computers is get them a computer. And this is where Linux comes to play. Okay, so a lot of old hardware out there, if you ask around, and I almost did this with the community when they were here. I still want to do it. You go out door to door, you knock on the door. You'd have to get an official affidavit legally in order to do this. You'd have to, or some way you'd have to do it because, doing this kind of thing could be really scary. You could say, look, do you have a computer? And they'd say, yes. Do you have a computer sitting up? Yes. But it's got our taxes on it from 1989 and we can't give it to anybody. And I say, okay, well, we've got this, official affidavit. You can call them and verify. We're happy to take it and to, destroy the hard drive in front of you and take the rest of the computer so that we can donate it. And then we'll put Linux on there and we'll actually help these other people learn how to put Linux on their own laptops. There are so many computers that get thrown in the fucking trash. They just get thrown in the trash and they go to the dump heap because people are like, oh, it doesn't run anything. It's Windows. I got a new thing. And if you put Linux on those machines, they would learn a command line. They could run it as a server. So one of the places to get laptops and computers is to get people to ask around and look deeper, and they will find a computer that somebody's willing to throw away. And if you can't get that, you can buy a machine that will run Linux like a charm for $200 at Walmart in America. We use the 100 plus laptops. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? You would just chuck 1,000 laptops just like that because you didn't want to go through the hassle of dealing with the hard drives. And people wonder why we question the budget decisions of the government and military. That just makes me fucking sick to my stomach.
The problem goes deeper. People now throw cans and bottles and they don't care. So
yeah.
Why would they care if it was a laptop?
I think they don't care as long as it's used it for them. I mean, and unfortunately, we're cleaning up everything in our house here, and I have like probably 90 mice, and I'm gonna donate those. I mean, I told you this. This is a true story. Those blinky lights on the bottom there, the 2 racks, 20 Mac Minis, brand new Mac Minis at the time. After SkillSec, we were retiring SkillSec and moving down. I donated those things to a local charity, and they sat there for a year. They didn't use them because they didn't have the resources to set them up and everything, and they were getting ready to throw them away. And I had like the universe contacted me like a year after that. I called them and I said, have you got those things? Are you still sitting there? It used to drive me, it used to keep me up at night. I said, do you need help setting them up? And they're like, no. And no, these are Mac Minis, and I mean they're $800 new, and so I said, can I come get them? And she go, absolutely. They were happy to get rid of them because they were just sitting there, taking up room. So I came in there, got them, and now they're in my Kubernetes cluster. Thank God. And they're going to be great. They're going to be great endpoints. The point is that there's this thing. So anyway, if you want to make a difference, you need to teach people how to use technology, because as soon as you teach them how to put Linux into hardware, they'll recycle the hardware all by yourself. So every single person that you teach how to bring new life into an old computer. I mean, when I learned Linux, I had probably 10 or 15 computers in my garage. One of them I talk about all the time smelled like cat piss because a cat literally lived in it. It was like on its side, and the cat liked to bundle up inside of it, and it had like cat hair everywhere. And I took the boards out and I cleaned them all up and everything, and it worked. It was a great server. But so that's where you can find laptops. You can like get creative and go out and find them. Is it feasible? It is feasible if you want to do that. The best way to get started helping somebody is to not bite off more than you can chew, and find 2 or 3 people, usually family or relatives, and then offer to help them. And don't do it for free. Don't do it for free. Make them pay something. Don't make them pay a lot depending on the thing, but make them pay. They won't appreciate it. If you just do it for free, they just won't show up because it's free. They're like, oh, I didn't need to show up. I'm like, oh, okay. Seriously, I know this is a problem because the extremely wealthy that I used to deal with, they just wouldn't show up and they wouldn't tell me anymore. And they're like, well, you still got paid, so why do you care? I'm saying, because you just took a spot from somebody else. I calm down, Rob. Calm down. Because the entitlement of some of these rich parents are like, I don't have to come at all. I'm just going to pay for that. It's like people who buy up real estate and don't ever use it. I'm like, no, you're not going to get back in here if you don't use it.
I think the problem goes deeper in this one.
Yeah, it does.
I know how frustrating this can be, but even also if you price it, if you price it, also it also blocks it for some other people who really needs it, but they have very difficult life constraints.
Yeah,
which is very sad.
Yeah, it is. And there's people. This question about contacting schools. So I've done this twice, right? Every time I've gone to help schools, and I've helped probably 4 or 5 in the area, I ended up deciding to focus on the people that I was mentoring, and they started every computer club in the region. I'm very proud to say that. And then in Mooresville, North Carolina, in Cornelius, the people that I came there, their parents and them went to their high school and their middle school, and they said, wouldn't it be great if you guys had a computer coding school? And the people that I mentored, most of them between 10 and 18, started the computer clubs in every and every high school and middle school in the area. And one of them was so far they drove 40 minutes here. Yeah, I didn't find that out till 3 years after she'd been coming here. I've heard about TEALS. Yeah, that's a thing. And I was so proud of that, because if you teach them, then they will go out and you tell them, hey, now you need to go teach somebody else. And I, they would go out and they spread the love, and they did. And then a couple times I gave in. I started getting kind of a reputation. It sounds like I'm flexing, but the private schools would call me. I had 3 private schools call me, and they were like, can you come teach our AP computer science class? And the one school that I said, no, I will never teach AP computer science. It's a horrible thing to teach. And they're like, they wanted it though, because they wanted the certificate. They wanted all that stuff. And I'm like, and then one of the private schools here said, no, we just want you to come do whatever you want. And I did that. I did it for 1.5 years. No, 2 years actually. And we did gaming. We did game development, but I had 40 people in the class, and it was not what I wanted. The classroom is a horrible way to learn. It's a absolutely horrible, broken way to learn. Nobody learns shit in a classroom. They don't. And I had people of all different varieties and levels in there that were all doing everything. So what we do is I would introduce something at the very beginning, and I turn the entire class into a lab. And I said, okay, you need to have something you want to work on, and you're all going to work on it, and I'm going to walk around the lab, and I'm going to help you with what you're stuck on. I'm going to walk around the lab and I'm going to help you with what you're stuck on. We had no tests. The only grade they got was on their final project, and we had an interview just like in a business. And I sat down with them one-on-one for 10 to 15 minutes each, and I said, show me what you made this year. Brag to me about this cool thing that you made and what you learned. And they would have to sell me on what they learned, and I gave them a grade based on that alone. And it was easier for me. They had the freedom to make whatever they wanted to. I could tell if a certain student was doing better than the others, and I could tell if a student was being lackadaisical because they had more ability. I had kids in there that were 18, and I had kids in there that were 12. And they said, "Can you do this? Can you do this with this many? This you know, just it was also a club. It was an after-school program, so it was not part of the formal thing. But they did get a grade. And after that, I just couldn't do it anymore. The use of the time was just such a waste. In that same amount of time, I could have helped so many more people more deeply. And the crazy thing is I actually gave some people in there. Another parent offered to give somebody a scholarship, and the person who got the scholarship completely wasted it. They came with me for a while. They were focused for a while, and then they just didn't care, and then they just stopped doing it. And then I started realizing I don't want to spend a second. The difference between me and this person potentially that's writing this question, and honestly, most traditional educators is, and I know this because I've dated an educator for a while, is because traditional education has to teach kids no matter what. Those kids don't have a choice. They have to be there. So there's this built-in antagonistic relationship between the student versus teacher. And there's people who don't want to be there. And so you have to set up, rubrics and everything to make sure that the people who don't want to be there actually get punished for it, because otherwise the people that are actually contributing, I mean, it would be better if you could find a way to motivate them. And so the advantage I had of doing a private school, so the piece of advice that's coming out of this is, if you're going to do this, stay the fuck away from bureaucracy of any kind. You want this to be a one-on-one experience. You want it to be on 1-on-3 at the most. You want to have TAs. You want it to be a personal experience, and you want to keep out the people who don't want to be there learning. If somebody isn't interested in learning, that's fine. Let them move on and make room for somebody else who wants to learn. And then the only people that you're working with are people that make you feel amazing because they want to learn. They want to learn. Yeah. Educational funding is results on paper, not the people's. Absolutely. Which is totally stupid. It's completely, it takes like an impasse equals one, continue.
I agree with your argument, Rob, but I don't think the classroom is a universal way of learning. Especially your method of teaching is not completely compatible, if you must say.
No, it's not. Well, I don't. No.
It's like running a Linux application on Windows.
No.
It doesn't work.
Yeah, the entire system is broken, and I'm not the first one to say this. Sir Ken Robinson, Ted Dintersmith, Paulo Freire, all of them have said that the traditional banker style of insert, knowledge into brain, sit there and listen to me teach you, is fundamentally flawed. And it's going to take a massive social revolution for us to even get close to true learning ever again. And it's not going to happen. It's not going because there's no financial interest in it. The people who, by the way, the people who are actually benefiting from this, there's two groups of people that are benefiting from this. And this is really crazy. So I actually benefited from this. There are people that are identified when they're in school as gifted and talented. Okay. And what do they do with them? They take them aside. There's two groups, not just this group. There's another one. This is the Malcolm in the Middle people. If you're an American, you know what I'm talking about. This is the Malcolm in the Middle people. Okay. They are taken outside of the system and they are given an entirely free system where they're taught how to think and all the shackles are off and they can do whatever the fuck they want. It's all project-based learning. It's exactly what I'm talking about. And thank God I was identified for that in middle school. And there's a lot of people that weren't. And so I had the luxury of doing this from the time I was 12. It's where I learned to code. I could use the only computer in the entire school because I was identified and separated out. How fair is that? Not. Okay, I'm not done. There's another group. There's a group of people that are thrown away. And my ex-stepfather was in charge of these people. He's a cop and everything, sheriff actually. And these are the people that by law have to be in school. And the people have made movies about these people. These are people that by law have to be in school. but they are such a disruptive influence, and they are sometimes dangerous that they completely take them out of the system entirely. They take them out of the system and they give them to some really brave teacher, and they say, we don't care what you do with them, just do whatever you have to, just make sure they don't kill anybody, they don't do anything bad, and see if you can help them out. And guess what? The results in that group are akin to the groups in the gifted and talented group. Why? Because they got taken out of the fucking system. They got taken out of the system. They were given total free reign to work on project-based things, to play a little basketball on the break, to go, to go dig into the problems, to actually talk to each other, to have a personal relationship with their mentor, and they knock it out of the chart. The people who suck are the middle group. By the way, I did this in college too. I didn't know it, but I went to the honors program. Why? Because there's 40 people per class. You know how many people there are per class in the main lecture halls for American science, American history? 400. If you think you're going to get any kind of personal experience in college and pay for that $200,000 education, you're fucking kidding yourself. I'm sorry. This is a topic that I get very, very spun up over, obviously.
I think the key to at least see a light to solve this is bringing back the ethics between the teacher and the students.
Yeah.
The teacher has the right to choose which student
Yeah.
to teach.
I think that would be fantastic. I think if they could, there's a lot of things that need to happen. One of my friends just entered college. Ugh. I mean, you have to do it though, right? You still have to get that piece of paper today. So that's what's so hard. Is paying $83K a semester? Are you kidding me? I thought $9K a semester was bad. $83,000 a semester.
I think you don't have to feel bad about being selected, because at the end you teach some students, and then these students have went to their other schools and made clubs and made coding clubs and spread your teaching.
Yeah, and that's actually the coding clubs. The coding clubs actually were successful, but the thing I don't understand is that why are the critical, career skills extra fucking curricular? Why isn't that the core thing? I mean, Google and Amazon, they're making their own education systems because they're not getting people to fill the jobs. And then you got Code.org that started up as a nonprofit, did a really good job actually. Code.org has done a tremendous amount of work there, but it's still a problem. 2 more years of school. Wow. Yeah. So yeah.
Something interesting. Some companies go in India and they just buy a lot of computers and spread it there.
Yeah.
And let them teach so that they can get a coding job.
And they let them do their thing. Yeah. And London.
It's good, but at the same time, it's it has its own critical bad points.
Yeah.
Because some of them might be self-learning, some of them, will see that, like, some of them will learn coding in a way that introduces a lot of, vulnerabilities and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah.
So
it
might have, a good impact in the short term, but in the long term, it becomes uncertain.
In the web, I have 2 comments about that. So I had people that would come to my program who were also in AP computer science, right? And one of them came to me and they said that they missed the question about the marquee tag in HTML. And that if you don't know what the marquee tag is, the marquee tag is an ancient tag from the 90s that makes text go across the screen. It's been defunct for more than 2 decades. And it's still a question on the test. No kidding. And he got it wrong because he didn't learn the marquee tag. He had to learn the marquee tag. He didn't learn anything about divs or anything. And yet he missed the question because he didn't know marquee. And he came to me, and thank God I was there. They would come to me and they would rant about it. Marquee will never die. And another kid came to me and said, I got this wrong on the AP computer science test. It said, what integer is used to indicate the first element in an array? Let me see if you can get the question right. What integer is used to indicate the first the first element of an array? 0. You're wrong. You're all wrong. If you said 0, you're wrong. He got it wrong. And so I couldn't believe it. I actually blogged about this. Yeah, I could probably find the blog. Still, it's in my thing. Let's start at 0. Rob Milstein. I got so angry. I wanted to shame the crap out of this. Yeah, no, I wrote a whole blog about
Isn't
this.
it 1?
It is 1. I wrote a whole blog about this.
Oh my
I
god.
wrote a whole blog about this because it was so bad, and it's a perfect indication. So not only did he get it wrong, but the teacher was teaching from the AP Computer Science manual, and the AP Computer
Oh
Science manual
no.
says the first number is 1. That's how broken this is.
Do you remember the ancient HTML tag that was, taking text and letting it, move from the right to the left and then, comes back
Yeah,
from
that's
the other
that's
side?
that's marquee. That's the marquee tag. That's what we were talking about.
Well, that reminds you of a lot of
Yeah, and that they still
that
are teaching
reminds me
that.
of Microsoft web application or whatnot that some people use to make, HTML pages. It
Strongest
was so
Rob rant
old.
ever. Yeah, are you mad, bro? I had to really check my emotion when I learned this. It had me ask myself, why are you so angry about this? Because it offends. I mean, look at what I wrote. I wrote this whole entire thing. And here you go. Look, chapter 0. Chapter 0. The NCC book starts with chapter 0. Why? Because, everything started at 0. And alternative to College Board. So College Board is the reason that this is a problem. And I mean, it's just so bad. Don't follow my Medium. I don't post it anymore. This is just leftovers from before. I should actually renew this and put it into something else because I had to do it. I almost put the teacher by name, but then I realized it wasn't the teacher's fault. They were reading from the
There's a lot
manual,
of good content
and then
in
everybody
Medium
else
about
came at
grammar.
me. By the way, okay, extra bonus points. What languages start with 1? What languages start with 1? Let's see if you can get some of those right. Don't Google it. Don't Google it. See if you can guess.
Haskell?
Lua, yes, that's 1. I don't know about Pascal. I only know of one other one for sure because I got it thrown in my face a lot when I wrote this. But this
Lua
is
reminds
this
me
is
of
This is
Roblox.
Java, by the way. You know what their justification was? That this is not a true form of Java. Fortran. Fortran does. Yeah, I don't know
You know,
about. They said
you
that
know
this.
that teacher who put the question of the index or the tag?
Yeah.
I think they did not care about what they are teaching at all.
No, they've never actually coded at all. I had somebody, I was teaching a game camp, a good friend of mine, and she said, stop teaching stuff that's not in the book. I can't follow it. I'm like, if it's not in the book, you can't do it? Well, it's like, have you ever actually done any of this? No. And I'm like, well, and it's true story, true story. The director, one of my best friends, the guy who gave me my first teaching job for a community college, which I had to leave finally because I was just, I can't take this anymore. It was insane. So he was a director. This guy's a director of the web and game technology. You probably figure his name out, so I don't want to dox him. I won't say the school. This guy was the director of technology for the web and game department. I'm sorry, gaming and simulation, web game and simulation. He was the director, right? He was the one who gave the person that knew me the job that they got. And we go out to beers and stuff and everything. We were at a pub, and this is a true story. We went to a pub, Old Town Public House. I'll give you that. If you guys have been there, I've taken you to watch jazz there before, IRL. So we went there and we got drunk, and he started laughing. He started telling me all these stories, and he told me he had never once made a web page in his entire life, not once. In fact, he was all worried about me getting the job because it was right before I was going to start. And I was like, I can teach this in my sleep. And he's like, he was worried. He was worried for me. And he started giving me all of these pirated CDs and books and everything. And then he showed me, he goes, I said, well, didn't you write all the lesson material? He goes, yeah, I just cut and paste from the books and put it in there and do what they say. He was serious.
Oh my
He was
god.
totally serious. This guy was a director of the department for web and game development. Never made a web page in his life. Never heard of GitHub. Never could ever do it. And he was an amazing human being, but also a very huge fraud. And so it's like, I don't know. So what is so?
I think it falls back to the how the education system, commodified, learning and made it into something that's not a vacation anymore. To
Yeah,
just becomes a commodity.
yeah.
Like
I
one
that
of the things I liked when I learned about programming is
yeah.
it's like a vocation.
Yeah, well,
To some degree, of course.
there, the guru mentality that they talk about in India, and the whole basis of like Jedi Padawan kind of thing, is before you teach, learn it. And there's actually a line in an MC Yogi song that I really like. It's a yoga song, and he goes, "Let me go learn from a." I'm sorry, I don't mean this to sound racist, but that's the way he sounds. It's like let me go learn it from a guru before I can teach you properly, and that's really what it is. You need. Look, that's the song. I'm not attacking any race here, but the concept is true. You shouldn't be teaching anything you haven't already learned. Period. Now, let me tell you the difference. Okay, so my friend and kind of pseudo son, Gabe, if you're out there, Gabe has regularly come in here. Gabe taught himself assembly, ordered his own boards that he designed in SolidWorks, and you know what I did? I never learned SolidWorks. I bought SolidWorks, put it on a computer for him to use. I bought the Gulagun boards, let him teach himself assembly. I did not know it, and I told him right out of the bat, I'm not going to try to teach it to you, but you can learn it. I facilitated him. So my word is mentor and facilitator. Because if you just own that you don't have to know more than everybody, then your job is to help them make contact with the people who they can learn it from. And sometimes that's themselves. I mean, just make sure they have the right tools. That's one of the best parts about school, including university, although it's not worth, $85K per semester. That's insane. Can you, just for a second, let's just take this for a second. I'm going to write this as a question. How much computer lab could you build for $85,000 a semester in your house? I'm going to put that thing. How much could you learn by yourself if you had $85,000 to spend? Right? This is where the whole system has just gone batshit crazy per semester. I would venture to say that the most lackadaisical, unmotivated person on planet Earth, you could hire 5 private tutors for that. You know what my going rate was like? Was people that would be with me for a full year. They paid about $1,200 a year for me. Do you know how much it costs to go to a private middle school? $28,000. $28,000, and they were shit. Their programs were absolute shit, and it doesn't matter. And the parents would pay it because they wanted the prestige of that school, because they wanted to get into another Ivy League school to have more prestige, and then they go on to become Ivanka Trump. Or somebody who has no clue what they're doing, Jared Kushner.
I feel bad for those parents, to be honest.
I do. They just, you know what? They think they're doing the right thing.
They have good intention, but the application just went wrong,
Yeah, there's multiple kinds of that parent, by the way. There are the ones who just want to show off, and there's there are some that appreciate it and that really, are trying to do their best for the kid and just legitimately don't know what to do. And then there's other ones that just want to show off. They just want to show off to their kids. And I've known, because I've had to deal with them for like 8 or 9 years. And some of them are the most entitled dick fucks you'll ever meet. They're so horrible. And that's why I stopped doing it. It's one of the main reasons I stopped doing it as the parents. I kept doing it because of the kids. Because the kids, some of them are so beat down by their parents. There was one guy so beat down. His dad in the interview would answer all his questions. And I actually told him to shut up. I said, I asked him, I said, so what is it you're particularly interested in technology-wise? And I looked straight at the guy and asked, this true story. This guy was a dentist in the area. You could probably find him. And I asked him point blank. I said, I mean, he came in and he was not saying anything the whole time. He was in 17, 18. I really shouldn't say this. He was like a national track star. He was a really beautiful kid. And his dad came in, and his dad did all the talking. And I had this interview on purpose because I wanted to see if there was going to be compatibility and everything. So anyway, we sit down, and it's him and I believe the woman was there, but my God, she didn't get to say anything. And then there was the guy that I wanted to work with, and he seemed reasonably friendly and everything. So I asked him point blank in the middle of the thing, because he kept talking, and yeah. And so I looked straight at him. I looked straight at the boy, and I said, "Well, what is it that intrigues you about technology?" And this guy, I kid you not, he like got in my field of view and started answering for his kid. And I went, hold up a second. Hold up a minute. I asked him. And he said, it gives me goosebumps to this day. It gives me goosebumps to this day because I fucking shut him down. He sat back in his chair, and there was no manager that he was going to go call and throw me under the bus. I was the fucking president of this company, and he's going to listen to me for a second, because I want to listen to what his son has to say. So I said, hold up a minute, and I wasn't mean about it, but I was direct, and I said, hold up a minute, sit down there. I'm asking him, and I looked at him, and he had his hand over his mouth like this, and he was like laughing his ass off. The son had his like mouth was like grinning from ear to ear, and I was like, this guy is in. And then but it got ugly because there was no room. There was no room for this person in my place. All the spots were filled. And then the guy starts offering to pay me scholarships if I kick out one of the other kids that I've been with for 5 fucking years. He's like, I'll give an extra scholarship if that'll help. And I'm like, no, you don't understand, sir. These people are already here. And he goes, yeah, but I mean, if it would help you out. And I'm like, the guy was trying to buy his way on top of one of these other kids. I'm not even kidding. And when I realized that, I was like, I don't know how well this is going to go. It gets worse. It gets worse. It gets worse. So I sent him home with an Acer laptop, a $500 Acer laptop with Linux on it. And I said, here, get good with this. Go practice this. You can break it. Nothing's going to go wrong with it. I told him why it was, it's cheap Acer. And he comes back. The very first session with this guy officially, he comes back and he hands me back the Acer, and he pulls out like a $7,000 gaming Razer laptop. And I kid you not, he says, my dad won't let me use that computer. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's the computer you're supposed to use, not this. I said, you can't put Linux on this. This is too fancy of a computer. We'd have to dual boot it, and then we'll have to go through it. You're supposed to use that other one. He goes, well, my dad doesn't want me to use that computer. I am not even kidding. This actually happened. If this had not happened to me, I would not have believed it. I would not have believed it. But that entitled Lake Norman attitude is just permeates all over. And after 8 years of that, I just couldn't do it anymore. I was like, I said, I've got to reach out to people that are not that sort of people. And by the way, 80 to 90% of the parents are amazing. The mother who is an entrepreneur who saved her money, the mother who sold their entire swing set and all of their toys in the house so that the kid could go for 1 semester. A friend of ours, actually. And I was only charging $50. It was hard for that family. They struggled, and they sold they sold stuff off so their kid could come. And then you get this dick who thinks I am going to kick out that kid because he just happens to be able to play a scholarship. No way. No way. And then don't get mad, get busy. After that, I was like, okay, I am going to change everything that I possibly can. I'm going to spend every waking second that I'm not drunk because I can't deal or because, I'm not screaming at somebody. That is where my motivation comes from. Your job pays for your online CS degree. You're able to cheat on 100% everything. Exactly. So you just get the piece of paper and then you learn it anyway. Good for you. Good for you. Install Linux on Alienware. It actually would be good, but yeah, no, he didn't want it. Then his lights wouldn't work anymore. His fancy RGB lights would have broke. And then his, yeah. There's the 1%, and then there's another 5% that think they're the 1%ers. Oh, those are the worst, by the way. Because they also don't have any money. There was a group like that. This guy acted like he was a fucking millionaire, and so I kept letting him. I learned my lesson on this. I kept not letting him pay. I kept letting him push out the payment. I was like, okay, yeah. He's like, what's coming, and everything. It was super elitist, right? So a year and a half later, I'm like, okay, your bill is up around $2,000, and they're like, well, we can't pay it. And I'm like, but and I didn't want him to not be in there because I make I never did that again. The problem with running your own business is that you can't do, I'm sorry, sir, that's not our policy. You can't do that because you have a face-to-face relationship with the parents. You have a face-to-face relationship with the parents, and then all of a sudden they say, you're like, well, and they give you the sob story and everything, right? They give the sob story to the person at the desk at Avis Rent-A-Car, and they're not going to get a sob story. They're not going to get what they want. They're going to go, I'm sorry, I can't. My hands are tied. But if you are a sole proprietor and you're the one working with the people, you can't do that. So then you have to learn to be a dick about it, and it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. So you just learn to not let certain people in. But even good people would have problems, and you'd have to say, look, I'm sorry, I can't let your son or daughter be here. Like, but you spent so much time with them, and I'm like, I know, and I want them to be here, but this other person sold everything in their house to be here, and you're not paying your bill, and you haven't for a fucking year. And I who's going to pay it? Because I am way in debt over this, because I've not been charging what I should have. The financial consultant that I talked to says you need to double your prices if you want to survive this, and then they'll easily pay it. And I'm like, no, because I had CTOs and CFOs and everybody, and they're like, well, you need to figure out how to give scholarships or reduce rates for other students. And I'm like, okay, now I'm in the business of deciding who gets to pay full price and who gets to be reduced. And I didn't want to do that. That's too hard.
Welcome to capitalism.
Yeah, it's like who okay, so you make less money, so you don't have to pay as much money. And I'm like, am I going to do that? That's a totally slippery slope. Because
May I ask a question?
Sure.
What happened to the student that
the one
that
he lasted 2 semesters.
I mean, after you
he came back all to the people that I teach in general, or that one.
Yeah, that one. What happened to him?
Which one? The one who didn't pay his bill, or the one who I told his dad to shut up?
No, the one who sacrificed.
The one who sacrificed? Okay, it's actually a really great story. So it's actually some really fun things about this. So this guy was pretty young. He was like 10 or 11, and I dealt with people at young ages who were kind of going through puberty and going through all those changes. It's really a tough time to be alive, right? You're getting beat up by bullies and all the things. That's why I did it, because I was really beat up as a kid. And he was this kind of humble person, and this is also a true story. Same kid, right? So he struggled. He wasn't naturally super brilliant, but he really wanted to learn how to make games, and he really wanted to learn how to code. And it was really improving his self-confidence to learn these things. This is something that is worth it all by itself. A lot of these people at that age, once they learn how to code and run their own Minecraft servers and stuff like that, their reputation and their peer group goes through the roof at that age. Because all of a sudden they're the only kid with a Minecraft server, or they're the only kid who's coding, or they're the kids who are SSHing into a terminal from school. And all of a sudden, all the other kids think they're like really cool, and it's worth every dime at that point. So this is what happened to this kid. So his confidence started getting up, and he started getting more confidence. And at some point in one of our classes, this I know this because his mother told my wife. They used to work together, and she told him. She told my wife. She goes, "I am so grateful for this stuff." She goes, "I don't know when your husband said it, but he said something about, so pay attention when you're about math, because you can't be a game programmer unless you do good in math, because it's all about functions and algebra, and you got to learn quaternions and stuff like that." And this is from his mom to my wife Doris. She said he went from getting D's in math to being on an honor roll in a single semester. And I was like, I had no idea. I don't even remember saying that. But that's
very wholesome.
But he made the association, and there's a secret in this. The secret is this: if you help people understand why they're learning what they're learning, they will find internal motivation to do most of it. And he did. And he went on the monorail. His confidence shot through the roof, and then he got so good at coding, and he was really good at explaining code. So he might not have been the sharpest coder, but he was good at explaining code to the other kids. So I made him a TA. And I paid him in discounts off because he's too young for me to pay. That's how I had TAs. The TAs would come in. He would come in and he'd be 1 to 3 because I wanted to keep it personal, everything. There was 16 people in there. I couldn't do them all. So I had 1 to 3 ratio for TAs, and the TAs would walk around, and I would listen to the TAs and learn from them. And I would listen to him, and the way that he explained, the algorithm for 9cat, like we just did on Sunday or Saturday, he was able to explain it in such a way and have fun with it. And you could see him just beaming. And so I guess it's called the Feynman Technique. I didn't know this, but the Feynman Technique is you make sure to teach it to somebody else to fill your gaps. So these TAs, so I had this perfect cycle where the people who learned it, many would rotate in. I didn't have any criteria other than they had to be relatively good with people and shower, and they would, come in. I had to actually tell a couple kids that because they wouldn't, and they stunk so bad. But they would come in and they would talk to them, and then they would improve their confidence. And then one day, out of nowhere, he shows that he's got pink hair. He's got pink hair and kind of a frohawk. And I'm like, oh my God, this guy. So his confidence went so high. In fact, you got to be careful because the confidence can go too high. And then you get Anakin syndrome. And I'm going to write a question here for this. I'm going to make up a question for this. What is Anakin syndrome? What is Anakin syndrome? This is my word. TM RTBX Rob. I am inventing that word. So what is Anakin syndrome? Anybody want to guess? He did. He ascended to cyberpunk status. Exactly. What is Anakin syndrome? There's nothing wrong with being a Sith. What is Anakin always doing? Actually, Luke Skywalker kind of does it too. It's that whiny. Obi-Wan's holding me back. My powers are greater than Anakin. He doesn't understand me. I'm better than him. So if you're not careful, especially if they are better than you, right? So if you're their mentor and you're their facilitator and you want them to be better than you, that's the irony. These midichlorians are off the chart. You underestimate my power. And yeah, and so what happens? They start to think that they're so good, and it's not just you, right? They feel good. Their confidence is to the point where they'll make their hair pink, right? And then it goes beyond that. And that never happened to this humble kid, thank God. Right? But there are a couple that I actually had to kick out of SkillStack because they got so bad at Anakin syndrome. They got so good. They learned so much stuff, and all of their peers would constantly tell them how awesome they were, that they would contradict me in the middle of class with everybody else around. So that's a horrible way to do it. I had one kid take me to task over sed-i versus pearl-i. Because yeah, if you're using pearl-i, you're an idiot. You shouldn't be doing that. You should be. He's like saying it in the middle of my classroom. And I'm like, I took him aside and I said, look, you know something? I mean, it's fine to have disagreements with me. Don't do it in class like that. Let's talk about it. And this, here's another thing about Anakin syndrome, though. The kid that I had to kick out, the kid took our lessons and he posted them to Reddit as cool things he made up himself. And he would write,
no.
he would write stuff about, oh, this is this cool thing that I made, and I'm just thinking about it the other day. And he would totally disavow the fact that he was ever at SkillStack. He just wanted, and you know what? I don't care about people showing their stuff. And I would tell him, look, you should be able to do things that you can stand up and say, I did this my own, and this isn't, but he would take literally copy and paste the lessons that we did and modify them and the story game stuff and things like that. And he would put it out as his and say, this is this thing that I thought up. I was just bored one day and I decided to make. He would say stuff like that. And I was like, dude, you don't have to do that. And he would say things, he would say things like that. And I'd be like, okay. And sometimes he would say that he came in, twice he came in with code that I knew he didn't write. And I knew that he was on Reddit and all this other stuff. So he came in with code he didn't write, and he was showing all the other kids in the class this awesome code that he wrote. And so I said, oh, that's really cool. And rather than tapping a nail and tying him to the ground, because this is the kind of kid, if you don't cure this shit, you'll end up working with a guy like this. And if you've been around the industry long enough, you've worked with somebody like this before. Like the guy, I
think I faced it in my journey.
Right. There was a director who took my email that I sent suggesting the architecture for the intranet at SwooshNet, copied and pasted my entire email, put his name on it, and sent it to like 25 people. Went to my manager. My manager had seen me send me talk to her about it. She brought me into the office and she said, this looks familiar. And I'm like, yeah, that's my email. He goes, yeah, but he's claiming it's his email. And we caught him. We caught him on it. We went down there and we said, what the hell? And so there are people that will do that. And this guy, when I asked the Anakin syndrome guy, I said, oh, I would give him a couple little questions. I say, oh, that's kind of cool how you did this and that there. He goes, yeah, so tell me why you decided that and what this is about. He couldn't talk about it at all because he had just copied it. He had just copied it and pasted it. And now he was trying to take credit for it. And I was like, dude, you are smart enough. You don't need to take credit for shit you don't understand. It's one thing to say, I got this code over here and I'm seeking to understand it, or I don't, I don't know where it comes from, but there is something about the ego in certain people that they cannot admit that they don't know it, or that they don't know anything. They're like, I know everything. And you run into these people and you're like, no, I mean, if everybody, hopefully I'm pretty, egotistical, but plenty of times I've been on the stream. I've said, look, I have no idea. I have no idea what I'm doing here. Tell me what that is. People say, oh, have you heard about this and this? And I really want to say, yeah, isn't that cool? And I have no idea what it is. And the one thing on Twitch it has really taught me is to just say, I don't know what you're talking about. And they're like, what? How have you not heard about that? I'm like, I don't know. I just haven't heard about it. Be authentic. There's no reason to not be authentic. You can't learn if you lie, because people will assume you know things, and then you'll get lost even further. So yeah, you got to be authentic, admit your ignorance, and don't make stuff up. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, especially if you do it live.
To be honest,
So
if I'm gonna mentor any with the students that I used to mentor,
yeah,
any person I'm gonna mentor in like programming,
yeah,
the first thing I'm gonna make sure that they have at least, in the way they have an attitude.
yeah,
I'm gonna make sure
yeah.
they are humble
It's hard. It's
because
hard. Sometimes they're too humble. They don't think they can do anything.
you
Most of
just
them.
put them in front of the code, and then because they don't have the humility to to try to think that they can,
Yeah,
that they have to struggle to understand it,
yeah,
they
yeah.
they get
Usually,
mad
yeah,
because their egos are not satisfied.
it's true. It's true. But most of the time, honestly, most of the time, you have the opposite problem. You have, imposter syndrome. You have people that don't think they can do anything. And the first time they write Hello World or whatever, and they actually successfully learn VI or use a terminal, especially, their confidence increases. If you're going to mentor, usually Anakin syndrome is usually not the problem. The problem is usually getting people to believe in themselves at all. So yeah,
I
yeah,
sometimes I'm not sure if this can work though. I sometimes try to picture it to them, give them a certain picture that when they try to, write a program, it's like writing a book
yeah,
to a person,
right,
and the person would try to, understand it and, embody it in their lives.
yeah,
And sometimes that can work,
yeah. I mean, yeah, yeah. I mean, it's code at the end of the day, so it does. It helps them. I mean, code can be an expression of art, and we do that with story games and things. But most of the time, it's just because they want to make something that's interesting, and then it grows into. Almost always, it's like, well, what if I did this? You teach them stupid things like, the Python Bridgekeeper series from Monty Python, or Nyan Cat, something simple and stupid like that, and then eventually, if you give them the freedom, they'll be like, well, what if I made something that does this that I'm interested in? And, sports stats, or we had a guy make a Bitcoin monitoring system to tell what the rate was, and stuff like that. So eventually, and then when they get invested in what they're building, then, it's easy after that, because then they just want to learn to get their thing.
I think the best example is the kid that became an honor in math.
Yeah.
He was able to connect math with the computer world, and then he was,
Yeah.
because coding is a practice, he was able to embody math and computer
Yeah.
in his way of thinking,
I went all the way
and that
through.
made him
That's
change.
yeah. I went all the way through calculus in college, and I still to this day. I mean, at that time, I had no idea why I was learning calculus. It was never. I had no idea. I could do derivatives and all that stuff, and I was like 300 level calculus and getting straight A's, and I was like, I'm glad I did it, because I feel like it made me a better programmer indirectly because of the thinking and stuff. But I've never once used calculus ever for anything. And I'm like, why didn't somebody come? I mean, how many thousands of dollars did I pay for those calculus classes when I could have taken something that was more directly in line with what I may have. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that. That's kind of taken. Speaking of which, we are way over time. But this is obviously this is a very huge topic for me, or I wouldn't get so ranty. So
Let's take one last question, shall we?
if it's live, if we have one last live question, let's look here. Do we want to answer the question about VI versus Vim versus Ed? I don't know about that one. I would point out that the Feynman technique doesn't technically entail teaching another person, only writing an explanation that, as is commonly described, could be understood by a child. The reason being is to eliminate jargon and explain things clearly, ensuring you aren't using jargon as a crutch. Yay! That I love the Feynman technique. Thank you for saying that. Confidence from competence is actually another way of feeding superior to others. It's a comparison, yes. Seventh shows it says I dropped out of computer science because of calculus. No regrets. Yeah, I don't. I think it's probably time to close up. Let's see.
Have you ever used WebRTC before?
Oh, there's a question of how do you go about teaching kids morality? Oh my gosh.
Oh no! How many lectures I'm gonna need for that?
Let's see if we can answer that one quickly. How about very carefully? Kids morality.
Oh no!
I don't think you can. I think look. I am not dodging the question on this. This is its honest to God answer. By example.
Okay, if you were to symbol it in one sentence.
By example.
It's symbolic.
I don't think you should teach anything unless it's by example, pretty much. And first of all, I don't like the word teach, right? Teach is a transitive verb that suggests that the subject of the teaching is going to be acted upon. And that is not how learning happens. I actually lost a student over this because his mom was a teacher. And I told him very publicly, I'm sorry, nobody teaches anybody anything. And she took great offense at that. Because, she didn't understand it. And I had to explain, I don't like the word teach. You'll hear me hear it because people use it. But my preferred way to say that is help people learn, facilitate learning. All those years I was there, now my goal is to help people learn. And the act of learning is an independent thing. I mean, you do it on your own. You are the one who should be reaching out and making the connections when you need to, asking the questions. I have an anecdote about that. So when I was teaching game programming, true story, the first time I started teaching in college, I was divorced. I was depressed. And my good friend that I met at a singles, meetup, who, by the way, I was never romantically involved with, a fantastic person though. She actually invited me to be in this game camp. So here's how the story goes. So I'm teaching, a bunch of these, what are you going to teach me now, dude? 16-year-olds or something. And they're, all these people were in there, and we had the book and everything. And the first day we did the book, and we did the thing, and they all did the thing, and I walked around and we'd help them do the thing in the book. And that worked kind of like for a while, right? But as the camp go along, it was only 5 days long, 7 days. As the camp started going along, they had a little bit more latitude, right? And this is when she asked me to stop departing from the book because she's like, I can't teach it. And so, but here's what would happen. I would go up to try to teach from the book, and everybody was looking down at their keyboard like this, and they were typing as fast as they could, and nobody was listening to me at all. Why? Why weren't they listening to me? Because they had this really amazing game that they had totally invested in that they wanted to finish. And they were really excited because they knew they were going to show their parents on the last day. And they were like really excited, and they were totally into it. Why on earth would they stop from that work and listen to some boring thing I had to say? So I stopped doing it. That's when I realized that this is the saying that I want tattooed on my forehead when I die or something. Learning happens in the lab, not the lecture hall. So I let it become a lab, right? But check it. So then like, well, how are they going to learn any of the new things? When are those gaps going to get filled, right? So all of the lab was all learning, right? And they were all generally making the same kind of project because they all had the same sort of requirements. They needed hit points and hit boxes and counters, and they wanted to have like a health bar counter. Everybody wanted. So this is what happened. Okay. So one of the kids is like raising her hand saying, I have a question. And I'm like, I want to make a health bar. Can I make a health bar here? How do I do it? And yeah. And so I would go help that kid. And then the other kid next to him would say, oh, I want a health bar. And then another kid completely down the hall or down the road there, not road, whatever, aisle, would say, hey, I want to do health bars too. And I was like, okay, everybody, how many of you want to do a health bar? And they would like raise their hand. I was like, okay, listen up. And then I would do health bars. But this is where it gets funny. So I would show them how to do health bars on the thing, and they were like glued to me. They wanted to hear everything I had to say. Every single piece of information was valuable to them. They were like, okay, and then they like want to do it, right? Because why? Because they cared. Because they wanted a health bar in their game. Because they were invested. So I saw that attention. I'm like, oh, look, they're paying attention. This is awesome. I said, okay, well, why don't we talk about percentages or binary or something? I would like go off into variable scope or something, right? And I think that was it. I would like start talking about variable scope. And by the way, this variable, it used to be a global versus a bucket variables. And then what are they doing? What are all the kids doing? And they're ignoring me again. And then I would turn around and the whole group would be completely ignoring me, writing down the health bar thing. And they're like, dude, they didn't care. So I thought, okay, fine. And I was like kind of, defeated by their lack of interest in the other thing. And so then they would like go to the next thing. And sure enough, Mr. Rob, how do we do this? How do we do this? And I would do one at a time, and we would have these like little lessons to help them get the things in it. And I would take notes. I was like, this is the things they need to make the thing, right? It's like, oh, hey, there's a page over here that covers this, right? And that type of learning is messy. And that's another saying I have. Learning is messy and loud. Learning is messy, and it's usually very loud. People are experimenting. They're blowing stuff up. They're, and you need to let that happen. And then you need to back away and take stock of the whole thing and see where your gaps are and find some sort of comprehensive resource that can help you fill those gaps. And as is, helped by teaching to somebody else. Teachers helping, novel idea. Can you imagine? The thing that teachers keep forgetting is that the student is their customer. If there's one thing that I could change about the entire education system, it would be that teachers get paid based on some sort of vote from the students. Now, there would probably be all kinds of shady things that would happen, but the way the system is working right now, the teachers and the people creating materials for the teachers, including those $150 useless, super thick textbooks that nobody uses and can't read because they're not written for students. They're written for the academics who are going to approve it as a thing. Yeah, I got to go too. So that would be my one thing. I think I'm going to say goodbye to my board people here. IH Developer, welcome and thank you for being here. Mr. Shells, thank you for being here. You've been very, Mr. Dunning-Kruger.
You're welcome, everyone, and have a great day, Rob, and the viewers as well.
Yeah, Dunning-Kruger is not knowing what you don't know, right? Yeah. All right, my dudes and my dudettes. It's a term of endearment. I'm sorry for the. I just stopped talking. I'll see you later.